Thank you for tuning in to the SkillsAware podcast. We are a human-centered, AI-powered skills recognition engine transforming how people and organizations understand and grow their capabilities. Each episode features insightful conversations with industry leaders, experts, and innovators who share their knowledge, experiences, and ideas on workforce skills, skills recognition, skills literacy, artificial intelligence, and so much more.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we're meeting today. And while we're joining from across the country, I pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. As we come together to discuss skills, capability and opportunity, it's important to recognise that this country holds the world's oldest continuing cultures, where skills and learnings have always been built through lived experience, community and practice. Hi, I'm Yasmin King. I'm a director and co-founder of SkillsAware, and joining me today are Margo Griffith, Principal Skills Consultants for SkillsAware, and Liz Horne, also a Senior Skills Consultant for SkillsAware. Thanks to you both for joining us today.
Pleasure to be here.
So we thought we'd sort of start off by just talking about some of the background of the mining sector and why we're focusing on that today. So Margo, do you want to lead off?
Well, I think what I'd love to start with, Yaz, is what the data is telling us. So how big is this skills issue in the Australian mining right now around skills and skill shortages?
So look, it's significant and it's structural. So skill shortages have increased from around 34% of roles in shortage, and in the last couple of years it's increased to over 60%, right? And that makes mining actually one of the most affected industries in the country. And in critical roles, like for example, mining engineers, the fill rates are sitting around at 42%. So most of these roles simply can't be filled domestically. And if we add the current political climate regarding migration, importing skills is going to also become incredibly more challenging as well.
So, yes, realistically though, is that likely to change?
Well, I mean, if we just look at what the pipeline is, given that mining engineering completions, for example, have fallen dramatically, in some cases by up to 98%, sorry.
Wow.
The overall number of graduates is so low relative to demand. You have to say, how can this be a short-term gap, right? This has got to be a long-term supply constraint, because you don't just become a graduate mining engineer overnight. So it is a big challenge. And then if you would also then compound the fact that age-wise, there is a significant number of people who are going close to retirement. For example, 35% of safety coordinators and lead drillers are now retirement eligible right now. Okay, so and look, I mean, and we should acknowledge there is work being done to address these challenges. Bodies like AusMISA are trying to say, let's redo the framework. We need a faster way of, having a national framework that enables us to get people with the right skills faster. But that's something that basically is going to take time to get agreement on and develop. So it's And the problem that's being faced is immediate right now. What can we do now to address these shortages?
Yeah, so that's slightly terrifying, all of that data that you've just shared. So what is going to drive new entrants? Like what do you think is going to change, or what needs to change to drive new entrants into this industry?
I think one of the challenges is there's a real perception problem, right? And research shows that half of the young people associate mining primarily with environmental damage. And I mean, look, as somebody who clearly doesn't have a life, I spend some time on job forums on Reddit, and it's really interesting seeing how many people will say, for example, when they're thinking about careers in engineering or in other things, will say there's certain industries I will not consider, right? So they've got a cultural position about what they're prepared to do, which is not driven by where can I get a job, which is quite interesting. I think the other thing is a lot of people don't understand that the nature of jobs in this industry has changed quite dramatically, that there is so many more technology-driven jobs than exist before. So, it's more about the automation and the maintenance of very sophisticated automation equipment, not actually operating it, because a lot of it is actually robotics. So I think that's a challenge for the sector. And the other is that there is certain cohorts that can't or won't consider a fly-in, fly-out sort of job scope. So if you think about it, for example, for parents, that becomes more challenging. So I think, there is the sector has got some, apart from just the structural issues, it's got some perception issues that it's got to overcome for it to be seen as a value proposition for people to enter.
Yeah. So then, as well as the nature of the jobs in that sector changing, they've got some pretty significant environmental, cultural, and social issues that they're fighting as well. So what do you think can be done about that? I mean, some of the things you can't change, but of the things that could be changed, what do you think about these new capability needs, for instance? What does that look like?
In my recent travels in talking to deployers from different sectors, one of the things that really stands out to me was in an advanced manufacturing employer, where they were looking for people to operate automated equipment, and they said that the most successful operator that they had was actually a barista.
Oh.
And it was because this barista had come constantly and said, I want a job, I want a job, I want a job. And the employer said, look, I just gave in and said, okay, I'll give you a shot. And he said, and he is now the most valued of his CNC operators, because he has incredible attention to detail. He can operate under pressure. He's got great communication skills, right? So it was a case of understanding what his fundamental characteristics were, and then targetedly training him in the automation component. So I think what I think this industry, like so many other industries, needs to do is think about how do we identify what skills we actually need, and of the pool of people that are available now, what can we do to target them to basically then upskill them? But you need to have visibility of their skills to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's so true. So we're talking about skills recognition there.
Yeah.
When people think about, I guess, entry, either pathways into, a certain sector or transition between sectors, they often think of formal training, I suppose.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be working. That seems to be broken somewhat. Why do you think training systems are not responding appropriately? What's structurally happening there?
Look, I mean, I think apart from the fact that speed is an issue, like how long it takes to design a new framework, new process, there's also a fundamental constraint in the fact that the capital equipment that is used in these mines is extraordinarily specialised and expensive. Typically, a piece of equipment costs between $5 and $8 million, and that means that, for example, your traditional training providers they simply don't have access to that. So while they might be training on something that might be a few generations behind, or they simply don't have access to the same sorts of environments that are needed in the workplace. And so there's a bit of a mismatch in that, you might have a trained person, but can they actually be fully job ready in the workplace when they've probably not been trained on the same level or sophistication of equipment that they're going to face? And so what we're seeing is a lot more employers are trying to deal with this themselves, and they're taking training in-house, and they're, strategically investing in partnerships with universities, for example, and really sort of looking much more at taking on the workforce development the tasks themselves. But the problem with that is then that's recognised in their ecosystem. Yeah. It's not building the whole ecosystem. So it's also expensive to do that as well. Right. So I think that's, some of these challenges of how do we basically think about it, not more from an employer going down to an individual and upskilling, but more about basically from an individual point of view, how do we recognise what all of their skills are? So you're building the whole pool bigger is what we're going to need to do to really address some of these, because the workforce constraint is going to hold us back from opportunity.
Yeah, big time, particularly in an area, such as resources and energy sector. It's a massive constraint. And I would assume these labor shortages are also, really impacting project deliverables, right? If you don't have the people to deliver on these projects, your chances of really, getting the flywheel of more projects, etc., is huge. And an economic burden.
Yeah. And then when you think about the push, for example, to get women in some of the non-traditional sectors, mining being one, and while absolutely, in theory, that's a great thing, they only make up about 18% of the workforce. And then you've got the FIFO component, right, which also makes it much more challenging. So, you've got fundamentally a more narrow talent pool, and it's also a talent pool that's under a lot of pressure, because FIFO, there's a lot of evidence that show that FIFO can really impact people's mental health, and also from a retention point of view, people might do it for a few years but then find that it's not sustainable and they want to do something different. So it's not just about bringing people in, it's also about how do you effectively keep them as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Great point. So we've spoken there's multi-pronged challenges here. From technological advancements, we've got perception issues around talent acquisition. We've got inherent difficulties within the way that job roles are constructed with FIFO, etc. We collectively on this call, right, are very deep in the weeds around skills recognition. So talk to me a little bit about how that might change, or what skills recognition and skills visibility could do for some of these challenges.
Yeah. So interesting. Look, there is software solutions in this sector, which basically, because obviously compliance is a massive thing, particularly in respect to safety. So there's a lot of solutions that really address, like, what are the job roles, what are the requirements of those job roles from a best practice point of view. But I suppose where we're coming at it from it is to say, well, okay, that's what's required, okay, but what are the people who are available? What can they actually do, and what can we do to align them to what those best practice needs are? And so you can do targeted upskilling, because target upskilling is going to be far more effective and cheaper, but also enables you to maybe look at what you already have access to, and in a shorter time frame, basically get them ready to be operational. And you really need to understand what people's experience is and map that in terms of capability. And that's really what we've tried to do in developing SkillsAware. And so, look, I probably at this point it'd be useful to get Liz to basically give us a short demo on, and in particular relevant to this particular industry.
Thanks, Liz.
Not a problem. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen and bring you to the online survey. So SkillsAware has a capability of bringing people to an AI-powered skills recognition framework to find out some information. They interact with SkillsAware, and it will help them identify and make the skills that they have really clear based on evidence. So they begin their journey by answering just some very basic questions about their background and experience. So in this case, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today about somebody who is a heavy vehicle mechanic with some time in the Australian Armed Forces. In answering the questions, there's sort of 4 different pages of questions that at any time I can add some evidence in the bottom here. I'm not going to do that during the actual presentation, but they will submit that information, and that information will be drawn into our system. And that system will then take them to, from the information they've shared in that overview, it will take them to a series of suggested skills that are related to just the information that they shared in the survey. The individual will then take some time to enter some evidence, so information that they've gathered over the course of their work and life experience, and they'll enter that information into the system by either dragging it and dropping it here on the right-hand side, or clicking into if they click into it, it will take them to their browser and they can download any piece of evidence. But what you see here is we've got a USI report, which is the report that they were given when they left the Australian Defence Forces and the qualifications they were provided with there. A couple of references, a position description that they're currently working with, a white card, a reference from the mechanics in the Australian Defence Forces, a resume, and then also a training that they've been involved with. So that's a total in this cases of 9 pieces of evidence. From that 9 pieces of evidence, the AI has identified 351 skills from just those 9 pieces of evidence. As an employer, or knowing that I want to focus on taking my skills into the actual mining industry, I would then go and look and see what skills are relevant to the mining industry. So I'm going to move our picture here. And the skills then that have come through is, you can see here that the follow safe work practices in an automotive workplace. That makes sense. He's a qualified mechanic. So the individual can work on the skills that they think are relevant to that workplace. And in some cases in the mining industry, they may say, here's your target, here's the target skills that we need. But these here are basically the electronics and also the diagnosing heavy vehicle, etc. And it goes all the way down to some critical thinking, participate in work health and safety, which is really important in the mining industry. And then it goes further down to other different skills. So I've just selected in this demonstration 20-something skills. Once they've entered that information, they can also have a conversation with the AI. So they can ask questions in this space. And in the questions here, it will guide them through the types of evidence that they may be able to find that would increase their percentage score here. And I'll get back to that percentage score in a minute. The types of evidence that they can put in, which is showing here, is a certified evidence, organisational evidence, so some information that you've been able to provide from a recent or a current employer. And then also certified evidence, which might be formal training. So in the case of Walter, our friend here, he had certified training within the armed forces. He's had references from his time in the armed forces and since he left the armed forces. And he's got a series of self-claimed skills that he says, I've done this. This is my resume. This is my information that I've got on my LinkedIn page. Those sorts of different things he's put into the system to actually start to analyze the skills that he has. Once he's done that, he can look closer at the skills. So in this case, it's diagnose and repair heavy vehicle suspension systems. There's two different scores here. One score is an experience score. So that says either he's self-claimed or an organization has endorsed his skills. And then in the formal skills, he has some sort of ticket that actually links to that particular skill. He can actually create a digital skill package if you like. So it's like a sample. I'm lost for a word here. Certificate that actually shows the skill. So it explains the name of the skill. It explains the different components that are involved in the skill. So in order to be able to do the overarching diagnose and repair heavy vehicles, it goes down into and breaks the skill down into 4 sub-skills. At the bottom of that, the evidence that's been used to come up with that score is actually identified at the bottom. The other thing that is here also is what's called our capability report. And this actually goes to explain why the actual PCI score has been, in the case of this SR1, prepare and diagnose for heavy vehicles, it's sitting at around about 60%. And so it will explain why the piece of evidence actually proves that that person has the capability of doing that job. So let's get back to that PCI. The skills indicator for this particular skill is 59%. So that's basically saying the likelihood that the person can do the task in the workforce based on the evidence that's been provided is 59%. That's the probability. It's not the score that we would typically have in a 0 to 100% score, which has the typical bell curve, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually the probability that the person can do the actual job in the workforce. And it provides the reasoning here. Further down, it also identifies the pieces of evidence that have been used to actually come up with that score. So the onboarding survey is one of them, a white card, makes sense, a reference, and then also the reference from the time in the Army, the transcript from his time in the Army, and again, the onboarding survey. And then self-claimed military experience as well. So you can see all of those different pieces of evidence are there for somebody to look at to validate that the actual person has those skills. So one of the overarching things that we were just talking about is how do we make our skills how do we see them? And this is a classic way of doing that. Just from the 9 pieces of evidence and a brief conversation between Walter and the AI, it was able to highlight 356 skills, and then we were able to zero in and look at 27 of those. And there's no limit to what the person could look at. But as you can see, they're listed here. The My skills that I've been working on for Walter are listed here in really easy to read format, and then they can see them all sitting down on the right-hand side. If I've entered new information into the evidence hub and it is relevant to one of the units of competency or one of the skills here, this update button will show up, and if I actually click on that, I can actually update it, and we should see the score change and also all of the information that's attached to it. So if there's more evidence that's attached to it, and the skills package will change accordingly. So that's a very brief overview of the system. But as you can, with the suggested skills, we can go down in those suggested skills and choose whichever skills we think are relevant to the job that is that we're looking to fill in our organization. So for instance, if we were looking for somebody in the risk management space, we would go in here and focus on our work health and safety and our risk management units of competency or risk management skills and see how their score went with that. We would then be able to use that information to be able to go, okay, they're scoring at about a 45, and our report enables us to look at individual sub-skills within that. So you can see one of the sub-skills is 67, one is 52, another is 67, and one is 50. So we might have a look and see if we want to increase that score. But if one of those came up as 0, you would know you could target your training for that particular person right in on that sub-skill within that area of interest. So ways that we can use the information that the SkillsAware provides are really quite broad, but it's a really great way of putting in minimal evidence that talks to our experience in the workplace and providing the suggested skills and being able to dig deeper on those skills to say, yeah, I want to understand those more, or I can see if I can get a better score at that. That would enable me to apply for a promotion, or alternatively, if I'm using it to help retain staff, we'd be able to look at those skills and say, if I provide this staff person with this skill, it might actually keep them in the industry a little bit longer and help us promote them through the ranks. Or in the case of Walter here, he's a diesel mechanic. He's also done the electrics in a diesel mechanic. He probably would be a good candidate to actually be involved in the remote operation of the heavy vehicles and understanding the information that's coming from those automated machines so that they know when it's time to service them.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's really useful to point out is the granularity of this, which is I think, one of the really important aspects, because that enables you to be, that's how you can be targeted. I mean, one of the examples that I often use is, people will say, oh, our HR system will tell us who's a good communicator. Well, a good communicator in what sense, right? There's lots of aspects to communication. In what context? In what way? And I think one of the advantages of the fact that we've got 71,000 rich skill descriptors that we measure against is that granularity, because I think the fact that this shows that somebody, with just 9 pieces of evidence can say they've got 300 odd skills shows that we all undersell what our actual capabilities are. The visibility of our capabilities is really quite masked. And what we're trying to do is say we need to unlock that, because if we do that, then there's going to be way more opportunities for people in areas that they might not traditionally think of pursuing with some targeted upskilling.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks. Yes, there's some international people on the call. One of the things and one of the questions that have come through is around, we have obviously mapped this system to the Australian system and the Australian environment. What about if we are, say, dealing with mining operations in other countries? Do we have the ability to map to other databases, for instance? Liz, can we do that?
We can. We're currently working with a group in Canada, actually mapping their standards of their training programs into the system, and it's working quite well. So as long as there's enough information about a standard, it can be brought into the system, and then the AI can map any evidence to that particular standard. And we shouldn't forget that some of the standards that are involved in the training packages in Australia could be helpful to some of those different countries where their standards may not be fully developed to the level of detail that the Australian ones are. So there's that combination of being able to assist with providing the structure for those as well.
Amazing. I see that we're coming up to the almost closing out the half hour, the 30 minutes. Thanks so much, Liz. That was great. Yas, is there any closing comments?
No, other than I think we're very keen to talk to anybody who might be interested in learning more about how we might be able to help them identify skills. I think one of the things we as a country, and I think this is not only us, it's certainly based on the things we are involved in internationally, is we know there are some real challenges facing industry sectors in getting the right people into the right jobs, and we need to think differently about how we can do that. And particularly in the context of what's happening with AI, we really need to work out what skills people have and how we can target and upskill them.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for today. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And yes, hopefully we can talk to you some more about skills recognition and skills visibility. And we'll say goodbye. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning into this SkillsAware podcast episode. Don't forget to follow us on your podcast app so you don't miss a thing, and be sure to visit our website at skillsaware.com to learn more.